Welcome to Power Play on Auditor General Day. That's when Michael Ferguson has this spring tradition of exposing the good, the bad, and the ugly of government spending. The man himself will join us in minutes, along with reactions from the Treasury Board President and the leader of the official opposition. Also ahead, the Chief of Defense Staff is meeting with a top NATO general as we speak. We will monitor his news conference for the latest on Canada's military role in the Ukraine crisis and bring you new developments and analysis. And the minister in charge of the controversial temporary foreign workers program is coming up. Under continued attack, Jason Kenney is pledging speedy solutions to ensure the program is not taking Canadian jobs or being abused by unscrupulous employers. And the culprit in the growing gap between U.S. and Canadian prices is more than just a low loonie. We'll talk to a right-leaning think tank which points the finger of blame squarely at the Conservative government. But first, we're joined live from our Ottawa studio by Auditor General Michael Ferguson to discuss the highlights of his spring report. Welcome to the program, Mr. Ferguson. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. I guess there's plenty of headlines here, but I sort of see a theme here. It's a bit of, you're finding sloppiness more than scandal. You're seeing a lot of short-sightedness instead of long-range planning. Is that generally what you observed?
Yeah, certainly we identified that there were some issues around looking at the long term, looking to the long term, whether it be issues around making sure that pension plans are sustainable or expanding penitentiaries. So, there needs to be a balance between managing both the short and the long term, but certainly some attention needs to be paid to the long term.
I want to get to your chapter in your report on the the prison populations. You do note that short-term things are okay, but in the longer term you have concerns. What are those concerns?
In that audit, what we were looking at was how Correctional Services Canada managed their expansion to the population, or to their facilities to house the inmate population. And what we identified was, they have expanded their facilities, and that will help them relieve some of the short-term pressure. But a lot of the decisions that they made were sort of decisions of convenience, if you want. They decided to expand certain penitentiaries based on the fact that there was space available to do that, and the expansions could happen quickly. But in fact, 8 of the facilities that they decided to expand had originally been on their list to be closed. So the decisions seem to be of convenience to deal with the short-term pressures, but they need to put in place a long-term accommodation plan to show how they're going to deal with accommodation issues into the future.
If I may be so bold, some of the Conservatives would say, what's wrong with doubling up prisoners and 2 to a cell, cram them in there, take away all their so-called amenities? How do you respond to that? Are they entitled to a cell each, or do you think double bunking could be something that would be acceptable?
Well, we're not trying to set policy in this, and we're not trying to sort of say, whether double bunking is a good thing or is not a good thing. What we're looking at more is, Correctional Services decided that they needed to expand. They have targets for levels of double bunking that are acceptable, and we're not questioning sort of those targets that they have in place. What we were looking at was simply they went through this expansion. How did they manage that expansion? And what they did was, again, they dealt with the short-term pressures, but they need to have a longer-term plan.
I found it interesting you said in some cases inmates that want to go down from medium security to lower risk penitentiaries, that's where the population problem is. They can't move down. Is that accurate?
Well, what we identified there was, the number of new inmates coming into the system doesn't seem to be, significantly on the rise. Neither does the average length of sentence. But the inmate population has increased over the last 3 or 4 years by about 9%. And it seems like perhaps one of the reasons for that could be if there's not enough accommodation at, say, the medium or minimum security level, it's not possible for inmates to move down through the system, as they go through programming and that sort of thing. So they can't move down through the system, and if they can't get to the minimum security level, they don't get paroled, or if they can't move out into the community, they can't be paroled. So therefore, it seems to be creating a bit of a bottleneck in the system. You know, and that's again a consequence of there being issues on the accommodation side.
I want to talk about public service pensions because there seems to be some exposure for taxpayers here that they're not anticipating. Tell us what we're exposed to and what can be done to fix the problem.
Well, currently the federal government has a liability on its books worth about $150 billion for pension obligations to federal civil servants. So there is already a large obligation. And you know, the government has in place, you know, or has determined that it can manage that and that it will be able to pay out those pensions. However, there are many risks that those types of plans face. You know, whether they be risks associated with people living longer, risks associated with you know, return on investment and those types of things. And we feel there needs to be much more attention paid to you know, what could those risks turn into, and what type of impact might that have on budgets well into the future. I think it's important to remember again that, you know, if you look at somebody who's 22 years old coming into the federal civil service right now, they want to know that those pension plans are going to be around for about 70 years.
Last point I want to get to quickly, the StatsCan, you pointed to them and said, okay, there's some concern about their job vacancy statistics, and that leads to whether the temporary foreign workers program is necessary and where. What's your concern about StatsCan, and do you think the temporary foreign workers program might need to be audited?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't actually do an audit of the temporary foreign workers program, and we didn't mention it in this audit. The audit was about how Stats Canada makes sure that the data it issues is of sufficient quality, and we identified that they do that and that they have a quality program in place. So that's all good, but they need to better understand what their users are asking for. So, for example, in their employment survey, they get information about job vacancies at the national and provincial level, but they don't have information at the local level, and some of their users are asking for that type of information.
Okay. Thank you very much, Auditor General Michael Ferguson. Interesting report.
Thank you very much.
Well, the minister behind the temporary foreign workers program is Employment Minister Jason Kenney, and he joins me live. Welcome to the program, Mr. Kenney. Is there a bigger headache in your portfolio in this temporary foreign workers program?
No.